So there's a lot in that passage, and I realise there is no way that I can cover all of it. So I'm going to hone in and focus on just a few bits. So the two main people are Elijah and Elisha. I hope you got that from the reading. Elijah is a prophet. If you've been around with us for the past month or so, you might have picked up on the fact that we've been following Elijah along his story. But the great news is that you don't have to have heard all of it to be able to understand what's happening today, I hope. This is actually the end of Elijah's story on earth, at least. He knows it. Elisha knows it. We as the reader know it. His earthly ministry is coming to a close, but the work is still there to be done. God directs him to Elisha, who is now his kind of protege. Elijah's kind of trained Elisha up. Elisha's watched him and followed him. And now Elijah's like, I have to go. My time is done. I'm going. You stay here. I'm going on this trip and then that's it. But you just stay here. And Elisha's like, no, I'm coming with you. We've come this far. I'm with you right until the end. And that happens twice. And Elijah's like, fine, you can come. So they cross the Jordan. And then the time comes for Elijah to go. I kind of imagine in the conversation going something like, my ride's about to arrive. Is there any last requests you've got before I go? And Elisha says, I want a double portion of your spirit of what you have. I'll be honest, every time I've read that, I've thought, that's a bit greedy, isn't it? That he just wants to kind of become better than Elijah. But as someone has now explained, it's not that so much as the double portion in that culture was the inheritance that the firstborn got. So that's Elisha basically saying, I see you as my spiritual father, and I want to inherit the firstborn inheritance of what you have. Elijah's response is basically that he can't promise that. It's quite a difficult thing. That's not for him to bestow on Elisha. But if he sees him taken up into heaven, then God will give him that double portion. Last week, Abby talked about power and the power each of us holds and what power we have over other people and how we use that power. So following on from that, I want to talk about what gifts we have. I want you to think for a moment, are there people you can think of who have invested in you? I'm hoping you can all think of at least one person. I'm very blessed and grateful to be able to say that a lot of people have invested in me over the course of my life in many different ways, both spiritually and generally in my life. Before I moved to Crediton, I was working in a cafe, rather reluctantly at first, I won't lie, but that's a whole other story of how me and God had completely different plans for my life. And my manager at that cafe saw something in me and invested a great deal in me, not just in terms of training me up to eventually be her assistant manager and lead the team and train the new team, which are great skills that I've taken with me into my other roles. But she also invested in my personal growth. We used to get a cup of tea every Thursday after work, and we'd chat about life and everything and what I was doing with my life. And she used to say, there's far too much for you to do in God's kingdom to stay in my cafe forever. And through that process, I ended up here in Devon, so you're all welcome. And she stayed a very good friend of mine. As a church, CCC invested in me when I came in here in so many ways. And with some guidance and a lot of encouragement, I found myself on the preaching team, and here I am talking to you all today. Where I work now, there are people that invest in me who take their time to train me and impart a lot of coffee knowledge. I work for a coffee company. And because of that, I'm much more confident in my job, and I can actually do my job much better. I could go on, but my point is, those people believed in me and still do. They looked at me and thought, yes, we'll invest our time in her, because it does cost something to invest in someone. So hold that person in your mind that has invested in you, and maybe you can thank them at some point. But my second question I want you to think about is, who could you ask to invest in you? That's a bit more difficult, isn't it? Seeing someone, seeing them do something, thinking you'd like to be a part of that, and asking them to invest in you. Why is that difficult? Maybe we think, goodness, they're far too busy to take time out to teach me and train me up or invest in me. Maybe we think that they do it so well that we couldn't ever possibly compete with that or live up to it. Comparison rearing its ugly head and building barriers. Or maybe we don't think we're worth it. We don't think we're good enough. We don't think we can do it. But the truth is, you are worth it. And the whole point of being trained up is in order to teach you how to do it. So please don't let any of those things stop you from taking an opportunity to get invested in. The biggest thing I took away from the passage about Elijah and Elisha is passing on the mantle. That can be quite a scary thing. In so many aspects of life and church, we see this. Someone has created something or led it, and we think, how could anyone possibly take that over because they've done so well? But passing on the mantle is actually a really healthy thing, and it can be done really well. And unfortunately, all too often, we see it done really badly. In churches too, you see churches with such amazing and exciting vision, and then someone retires and it falls flat because they didn't raise anyone up with them to carry on the vision once they stepped back. And it happens in the secular world too. Now, I spent some time trying to think of good examples of this, of passing on the mantle, both in where it went badly and also where it went well. And I was really struggling to think of any. So I asked the audience, which was pretty much anyone I saw last week, and also my family. We have a family group chat, so I dropped a quick message in there. The benefit of being in such a large family is that I was sure that at least one person would come up with something helpful that I could use. I got 2 votes for Elijah and Elisha, so I was like, great, I didn't tell you that's what I'm preaching on, but at least I'm on the right track. And then my brother mentioned Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer. My brother is much more aware about computer and business stuff, so I'm just going to directly quote what he said to me about him. Bill Gates was an innovator and pushed the boundaries, and Steve Ballmer was one of the first people he hired and then who took over from him, but he was so scared of failure that he was too slow on every uptake of new markets, missing the social networking, the smartphones, and product simplicity. And he felt so much pressure and fear not to fail in taking over from Bill Gates that he ended up failing. How many of us feel that way sometimes? How often does that happen in churches too, where we take over running something or helping out with something, and we're so worried we won't do it the same or right, or that we'll fail. And because of that, it's sort of become the self-fulfilling prophecy. On the flip side, sometimes passing on the mantle is done so well, it becomes just the most beautiful story and legacy. Last time I preached, I mentioned I liked mysteries. So has anyone here watched Inspector Morse or Inspector Lewis? Any of those? Perfect. I'm glad some of you have. It's one of my favorite, they're some of my favorite shows. So for anyone who hasn't seen them, Inspector Morse was a police inspector, and his detective sergeant was a guy called Lewis. And throughout the Inspector Morse series, Morse mentors Lewis, trains him up, eventually retires and passes the mantle on to Lewis. And then you get a whole nother TV series about Lewis, who has a detective sergeant called Hathaway, who he trains up and passes on all the things that Morse had taught him. And that's how it should be. You get invested in, you invest in someone, and they invest in the next person, which creates a beautiful chain reaction and legacy. And I do want to lay this out as a bit of a challenge to all of us, myself included, to get bold about asking someone to invest in us. That's how a community thrives. So have a think, look around, and ask yourself, who would I like to invest in me? And go ask them. And hand in hand with that, you might have guessed what I'm about to say. Who could you invest in? Because I'm a firm believer in the fact that we all have something to give, something to share, and something to invest. Our gifts work best when shared. We weren't meant to hide away and keep our gifts hidden and talents all secret. Like the book I was reading to the kids earlier, the umbrella worked to help people. It was a gift to be shared. And what happened when Mr. Fox wanted to keep all the blessing and gifts for himself to make him rich? It downpoured on him. We were made for community, and the gifts we have, the knowledge we have, and the things we bring work best and shine best when shared. Elisha didn't ask for a double portion of Elijah's gifting, spirit, and ministry to make himself better or to benefit him. He asked so that he could better continue Elijah's ministry, God's ministry on earth, so that he could help people. He used God's blessing on him to bring life to the people of the city. He healed the water for them with God's power. So what gifts do you have that you can share and pass on to someone else? Now, I mentioned earlier, I asked my family about good examples of passing on the mantle, success stories. My dad gave me 2 suggestions. One was Elijah and Elisha, which was my starting point. And the second one he gave me was actually where I was also building to finish. So there was nothing like that to make me feel like I was on a good track with this preach. That example was from John 14:12. Jesus passing on the mantle to his followers, which includes us, thankfully. Truly, truly, I say to you, the one who believes in me, the works that I do, he will do also, and greater works than these he will do, because I'm going to the Father. And he continues in verse 26 to say, the advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and will remind you of everything I have said to you. The Holy Spirit is our double portion from Jesus. So let's go, let's take up the mantle and do greater things and be encouraged that you can.